I'd like to call to order the February 26, 2024 Mountlake Terrace Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you please take the roll?
Chair Batista?
Here.
Vice Chair Harrison?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Betcher?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan is asked to be excused for tonight's meeting. Commissioner Stenson previously had an excusal. Commissioner Landis said he would probably not be able to attend, and he is not available online at this moment.
All right. Would anybody like to make a motion for Commissioner Morgan and...
I take that back. He just popped on.
Oh.
I was going to say, I saw him on the street. He told me he was going to shine. Come on.
So we're just looking for
Morgan.
Commissioner Morgan. Yeah. I did see that email that he sent. So would anybody like to make a motion for an excused absence for Commissioner Morgan?
Motion to excuse Commissioner Morgan.
I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Morgan. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. So we'll go ahead and move on to item number 3, approval of the February 12th, 2024 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes or corrections to those minutes?
I didn't see them, but I'm sure there's no corrections.
All right, I'm not hearing or seeing anything. Oh, looks like Commissioner Landis, you got your hand raised?
Sorry, that was an accident.
Okay, just making sure. All right, so not hearing or seeing any objection, we'll go ahead and declare those meetings minutes accepted as presented. Item number 4, public comment. Let the record show there is no public in person. Do we have anybody online who has signed up in advance to make comment on public comment online?
No one has signed up in advance to make public comment online, and no one is available online.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to item number 5, comprehensive plan update.
Good evening, Chair Batista, Vice Chair Harrison, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jonathan Morales, Senior Planner at the City of Mountlake Terrace. Today I'm joined with Sierra Carson from our OTAC consultant team, as well as Mandy Roberts. So today we're revisiting our discussion on the Vision 2044 Comprehensive Plan Update. So I will share my screen. Okay. So on today's agenda, we have a continued discussion on the updated vision statement alternatives and a recommendation from Planning Commission. Secondly, a majority of this meeting will be a sub-areas workshop focused on the Melody Hill and Cascade View sub-areas. And then we have a presentation of the draft land use and housing policies and distribution for your consideration and review. So just wanted to note that we do have a target presentation time of about 1 hour and 20 minutes, as we do want to focus a lot of the time on the sub-areas workshop. So this first agenda item, we want to limit it to about 15 to 20 minutes, and we hope that what we're going to present to you reflects what we last discussed at our last Planning Commission meeting with the draft alternatives. So at our last meeting, we got back some feedback from you all as to sort of what updates we should consider for the 3 alternatives. So we're bringing back 2 alternatives, Alternative A and Alternative B. As you can see, so what's in red with the underline is what we've changed. So we wanted to ask the question, how well these alternatives align with the previous discussion. Are we on the right track? Did we gather everything that was recommended by you all? And then we also seek a recommendation from the Planning Commission to identify one of these as a preferred alternative that we can then bring back to the community in spring engagement events. So I'll read Alternative A. Mountlake Terrace is a welcoming and inclusive community with safe, connected, and varied neighborhoods, thriving activity hubs, diverse housing and economic opportunities, and an expansive network of parks and recreation programming that celebrates and supports diversity, arts, and culture, and engages in responsible environmental stewardship. And then alternative B, there were some minimal edits. So Mountlake Terrace is a welcoming and inclusive community that values safe and connected neighborhoods with access to parks, a vibrant town center, and neighborhood commercial areas, offering diverse housing opportunities, responsible environmental stewardship, and is rich in its arts and culture. So I guess we can open it up to your feedback. Did we capture it all?
I'm seeing head nods. Yes. I guess I'll start off. I like A. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I like A. Oh,
I like B because it's shorter, but A is also good.
I think I lean a little more towards A, although I do also like the shortness of B.
I agree. The shortness of B is nice, but I think A captures it better.
How much shorter is this than the original vision statement, out of curiosity? Like, what could have we done here with this exercise?
Are you talking about alternative A?
Yes.
I would say it's probably like a few words shorter. It's not that much shorter. There's a lot to pack into a vision statement. It speaks to the goals and what we want to see in the community. So it's very hard to get something that's very condensed.
I saw Linwood's, theirs is almost a page long.
Yeah.
Because they have a little bit like that on the top, and then they go down and talk about each of, like, maybe each of the highlighted things, they would talk about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see those that have statements as the goals. Mm-hmm. So they can be a page long. But I think we're pretty good with this, what's shown here.
Let me just
2 pages.
check in with our online commissioner. Commissioner Landis, how do you feel?
Sorry for the background babies. I think I just did a quick count. I think it was 45 words in alternative A and 40 in alternative B. So it's a 5-word difference. So if it's only five words, I think I like alternative A better.
All right. Kind of sounds like we're leaning towards A.
Okay, so we'll consider that as the preferred alternative, and then have that be the recommendation to the community. So, thank you.
Did we get that in under your 15-minute time limit?
All right, and then, so I'm going to pass it to Sierra, who's going to lead the sub-areas workshop, and I believe Mandy will be supporting. Okay, there you go.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me here tonight to lead this discussion. Hopefully be workshop-like on sub-areas for the city of Mountlake Terrace. So we just want to start with a couple of just pre-facing slides to just set the stage on the conversation we want to have here tonight. So just the definition that we currently have for what is a sub-area plan. It's a long-range plan for a limited geographic area with a community. Pretty short and succinct. As currently stands, Mountlake Terrace has 6 different sub-areas. We want to provide this map here, although I'm sure that you are familiar with sort of how these are laid out. And these 6 sub-areas are 6 different distinct areas of the city, but there's definitely still an understanding that at only 4 square miles, there's quite a lot of connections still between them. So as we move through the conversation tonight, we want to talk about, what is unique and about the 2 sub-areas we're going to focus on, Melody Hill and Cascade View, but also acknowledge that there are additional needs maybe to connect these parts of the city to other parts that are more south. So sort of why are we sub-area planning? We are sub-area planning in part because this was identified as something that was important from the Planning Commission. So we're coming back here to have this conversation with you all tonight. The city currently has a town center sub-area plan that was adopted originally in 2017 and updated in 2019. There's been previous sub-area planning additionally for Melody Hill, but the other parts of the city, including Cascade View, really don't have extensive sub-area planning that's been done in quite a long time, which is why these are parts of the city where it's important for us to take a more focused look at, what is Cascade View, sort of where are the activity places, and what is missing for us to make this a complete community, complete neighborhood. So these are separate documents or appendices, these plans that will have findings and recommendations for what should be done in the Melody Hill and Cascade View sub-area. And those recommendations will be integrated into the comprehensive plan. That's part of why we're doing this part of the work concurrently. And those findings, recommendations that we'd like to have, start that conversation here tonight is looking at transportation, looking at multimodal networks. We have not a lot of road connections, so where are safety improvements needed? There's been a lot of talk about connectivity. What does that look like in this context? We can talk about zoning changes. There's been a lot of discussion as part of this whole process on what does the future of land use look like citywide, but we can take a more focused look at this part of the city and maybe start having some further conversations about sort of contextually what that might look like. Also understanding that parks and open space is a amenity that, people love parks. I think a lot of people have said that they love the parks in Mountlake Terrace, and so there's a knowledge that there's maybe not a lot of that kind of amenities in this part of the city. So what are those needs like? And then understand the impacts of growth, talking a little bit about what kind of capital facilities improvements might be needed. So the way we are going to run this workshop today, because this is a Planning Commission meeting and subject to Public Open Meetings Act, is we are going to hold a digital online workshop where I will have a PowerPoint open and a couple maps of the sub areas and can facilitate and write down your notes and discussions about what is needed and what we love about these two parts of the city. So we have we've structured this in a very similar way to how this conversation is run with the Comp Plan Advisory Group. We want to use, we got some yellow stickers to place just to note where are hubs of activities and where are places that should be studied further as hubs of activities. Hubs of activities to be defined as, retail spaces, community centers, places for gathering, sort of, is it a store, is it a school, sort of where are the focus points. We want to use red dots to identify places that we could potentially be concerned about. Is this traffic pedestrian issues? Is this part of the sub-area that's missing a certain amenity? And then I have text boxes to add some commentary to what is being discussed. And then overall, what we want to take away from this is our sort of, first workshop with this group over sort of our initial thoughts about sub areas is what are the needs? Do we need community spaces? Is it park access? How does that get integrated as recommendations for the comp plan? Sort of what does the housing look like? And then we've talked a lot about the vision for the city, but what is the vision for these two parts of the city as at a more neighborhood scale? And just a couple of things we wanted to take note of is that we've heard that there is interest perhaps from this group in studying just the broader conversation about sub-area boundaries and sub-area naming. We understand that this is a part of a broader conversation because it has implications for all the sub-areas and should be verified through public input. So part of our discussion here today could lead to whether or not there should be additional policy within the plan that might speak to addressing these two issues or concepts at a different time. As we end our night tonight, we'll be handed off the comp plan policy document for land use and housing. And so there's some information in there as well as sort of, what's the next step for sub-area planning in Mountlake Terrace. So I guess before we move on to the workshopping portion of this evening, are there any initial questions about how this is going to work?
Are we limited to dots and boxes, or do we have other ways of marking up the plan? I know with this typical exercise, you've got like a piece of paper and then we go around the paper. But in this case, it sounds like we might be a little bit more limited.
I do have access to draw other shapes. This is trying to give us a place to start.
I'm assuming it'll smoothly, but just in case we kind of have difficulty with the, just 100% virtual, do we have a backup plan in place where we have a physical map that we can use and then that information can be aggregated?
We do not have a physical map here tonight.
I'm not seeing any other comments, questions, so I think we're ready to move forward.
All right. Also, Shannon has the handout of the workshop slide activity, so you can see both things in front of you at the same time. So what we have here is I have a zoning map of the Melody Hill and Cascade View subareas, and I also have an aerial view map of the Cascade View and Melody 2 subareas. They are the parts of the city that are not covered in that sort of white opaque layer. And we have Melody Hill on the west side of the freeway and Cascade View here on the east side of the freeway. So I guess, is there a particular map that we would like to start out with? And I will say that there's an understanding that this is a kind of a clunky way to do this exercise, but we are trying to find a solution here that does meet with the format of this meeting.
I personally find the sub-area of the zoning map easier to read. What does everyone else think?
The one that's showing now.
Yeah.
Yes, I do find that one easier to read.
Yep, sounds like we're good with that one.
Fantastic. I guess, is there a commissioner who'd like to start us off with their thoughts about, what's happening here in these two sub-areas, things you'd like to point out?
Actually, I have just a quick question of clarification. Looking at the location of the blue lines and the dots, I'm assuming that's bus routes and bus stops?
Yes, so the blue lines and the blue dots on the map are representing those existing bus routes run by community transit through the city. And most of those, if not, are connecting down to the Mountlake Terrace Transit Center or to the Linwood Transit Center or to the Edmonds Transit Center.
Does this also include the proposed changes for future routes?
Yes, it does. And you will note that the future change is the new line that is running 212th along the north side of the city, doing that little jog next to the lake and then over to 99. That is not an existing route. That will be a new route.
My understanding, though, is that the bus stops between 66th and 56th are going away, though, because those are commuter stops for the 405 and the 810 and the 871. Is that correct?
Yes, the commuter stops sort of on either side of I-5 will be going away.
Yeah, so our big old main street in the middle has a big chunk missing from it if you're trying to get from one end to the other. If we're talking about 220th as a future activity hub that also extends across the interstate. If That's the size of the comment box. We might want to make multiple maps of this, one for each issue, one for transportation or something, just a suggestion. And I'd also like to comment, that's not just transit, that's, you know, I think pedestrian stuff as well. I know there's several logical connections probably across, like if you look at, for pedestrians and bikes and things like that, like if you look at where 58th goes north from 220th, it kind of is divided by the interstate and then goes under, like the interstate is just kind of a big berm right there. Mm-hmm. There might be other possibilities for connections further south, like from Jack Long Park across 222nd. That sort of seems like a street that goes straight across pretty logically. And there's some terrain change there that makes that a little bit easier to build a bridge. So I think just, you know, maybe a bunch of how do you connect across the bridges, because we're making a bunch of, you know, we've got two very separate neighborhoods here that we're like planning at the same time, but they're, you know, all kind of one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since we're kind of talking about this area, I've been thinking about this concept for a while because they, you know, it's being proposed for parts of Seattle, and while, you know, our little ravine there is quite wide, you know, if all options are on the table, what, you know, about the option of possibly lidding I-5 through a portion of the city? That would definitely create better connectivity and create more open space and more than just a bridge. I know that, you know, there's a lot more moving parts involved with that, and the cost is a lot higher, but, you know, the lidding concept is being explored, you know, in other segments of I-5, so just, you know, throwing that out there.
Yeah, well, it is a big old ditch, so I guess it would be easier to do in some parts than others. South of 220th, north of 220th, it's a big old berm, so it's probably harder to do there. But I think, especially if they ever build a 220th station, connections across the interstate might become easier to fund. I have many thoughts, but I will also probably just talk forever, so I will pause often.
Just kind of looking at the map and seeing, you know, between 44th and 52nd, you know, up on 212th, I don't know why, for some reason, I thought that there was a bus route running through that segment, so I'm kind of surprised that there isn't, especially given the amount of apartment complexes that are up there. I don't suppose, you might not know, I mean, do you know if community transit had maybe some alternative proposals for routes that would use that segment?
I have not seen anything from community transit that runs along this 212th connection, but I can go double check that. I do know that both the 52nd route and the 44th route do run straight up to the transit center, and so perhaps there's connect, and I know that there's a pretty significant grade through there, so it might be about perhaps connecting folks to those arterials.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was, you know, thinking as well. Might be, you know, a future topic question, like say, you know, especially since we're targeting that area, you know, for potential future growth, you know, maybe in the future, those population numbers will be a lot higher for community transit to consider some sort of service going through there, you know, just to kind of help with that walk-shed issue.
Yeah, or if a lid is too prohibitive, then at least more bridges or whatever, or, you know, pedestrian things across I-5. Like, I think maybe the summary is like, how do you cross I-5? Like, that's kind of a critical question for our town. One we don't have to answer tonight, but I think the map shows some opportunities, personally. Because I cross the 220th bridge on my bicycle frequently, and it sucks. There's slip lanes all over the place, and the cars all turn, and, you know. I think you brought up the grade change earlier. And just as a random thought, do you think it'd be worth it to schedule some walking tours of these areas in the future?
Thank you. Like, I kind of feel like we need to
Absolutely.
go on a field
Yeah,
trip.
that can be maybe something we can consider for an engagement activity.
Yeah, I think that's very worthwhile. Earlier in the process would be good because I think getting photographs and records and things like that of existing conditions, like the maps kind of don't show some of the challenges that are here, like the interstate, which is, you know, not only an interstate, but there's also significant terrain changes and, like, you know, especially as you get up to 212th and a little bit further to west, like stuff just doesn't connect through. And so it's a bit, you know, opportunities for sure, but also some challenges.
Yeah, I can take it back to the team.
Cool. Kind of on the topic of transportation, and maybe, you know, I think separating, like, the way I get around in this place, you know, by car and by bike and by on foot are all very different because the roads, especially 220th, are just really massive and don't really have good facilities for people who aren't driving. But then there are also some, like, connection streets that go through there, like, and even parks. Like, I think if I were to go up from 58th and I wanted to go over to 44th, what I would do is I'd go north along 58th. There's a little park that, like, you can go through and connect to, I believe that's, I don't know the numbers of the streets, to 16th, I think, that goes across, and it's just kind of at the top of the hill, and then, like, you can kind of continue through that street and it takes you to 44th, and then there's not really a good way to go to 44th, so you know, you kind of have to bike on the sidewalk there or take this convoluted route through the school. But I think this idea that, you know, certain streets might be more for pedestrian or car or, you know, bicycle routes, like a greenways program or something, in addition to any kind of more hard infrastructure. Like if we were to put, you know, a separated bikeway on 220th or something, or I know we've got new bike lanes coming in on 66th, but the connection to the interurban trail, I think, is also in sort of other bike ped infrastructure is going to be important. The other one that I sort of like to use is from the high school. You know, if you go from, is it on here? Oh yeah, so there's like actually a way that you can connect through Evergreen Terrace Elementary, or through Mountlake Terrace Elementary. There's like a little sidewalk that kind of goes to that street back there. Then there's that northern extension of Terrace Creek Park, and then there's a little hop over to 220th where there's this sidewalk that goes back through the LDS church over to you know, there's a little park there that takes you to 44th. Like there are these little like connections that kind of go through town, and then going from the school north, there's like a street that has a connection to 212th that like, then there's a logical like connection that kind of goes, and this would be a lot easier if I had a map, so I apologize.
I was going to say, I could start drawing some of these out if we went a little bit slower. I'm like sort of following you, but I'm getting a little bit lost.
Yeah, I'm getting lost too. And
is this something I can submit as a supplemental information? Because I feel like there are several of these routes that kind of already exist.
Okay.
And I can bring them to the group. But yeah. So maybe just general summary, alternate routes that aren't main streets that could be explored as like a more built out network for pedestrian bicycle infrastructure.
Okay.
It's kind of on the topic
How
of
long have you lived in Mountlake Terrace?
I'm sorry?
How long have you lived in Mountlake Terrace?
7 years.
Okay. I don't know any of those places.
I guess, Mandy, did you have a thought to share here?
I did. I was just waiting for a polite time to suggest that I think maybe we should focus a little bit more on land use and needs within the sub areas related to parks or public improvements. Because just to remember, we do have transportation as a separate element.
Okay.
So we will have that opportunity in the future. So I just wanted to make good use of our time tonight and making sure that we're getting everything marked up as you had wanted to, Sierra, for the different dots and whatnot. So
Okay.
let's facilitate that. Yeah.
Cool. So in terms of the different alternatives we're studying sort of at a macro scale, could you remind me where all the big circles we put were?
Yes. So for pretty much for both alternatives, whether it be alternative 2, alternative 3, which would study different sort of scales of development, we would be looking at sort of all of the existing multifamily development here at the top of the north end of the city. And then there is a large oval circle that sort of encompasses both sides of the I-5 interchange with 220th, with the understanding that there needs to be further study, and if there are recommendations from this group on sort of where and how far that kind of development would extend. Additionally, the transition zone or a future embodiment of the transition zone would be extended down 66th over here in Melody Hill, and also up and down 44th here on the east side of the city.
Okay, so that kind of gives a structure of, we've got two, if we were to call them main streets or whatever, we've got 212th, 44th, 220th, 66th. Is 52nd part of that at all?
And 52nd as well along sort of this portion. Pretty much where you see the bus lines is where we did the buffering for the analyzing the transition zone.
Okay. One thing I remember my architecture school professor telling me was that a street is, not always a good boundary. Sometimes it's a good connection. And one of the things I see here is that if we're looking at doing zoning on 220th, the sub area incorporates what's on the north side of 220th, but we're not really sure what's going on the south side of 220th. So I think that is a thing to consider as well, because like the right of way of 220th is actually quite wide, at least up to 56th. And so, if we are looking at, how do these neighborhoods connect across the interstate, and is what happens east of the interstate similar or different to what happens west of the interstate, I think we'd need to look at both sides of 220th. Or I don't know, what do you all think? Do we just have like a weird wall at 220th, and then like on the left side it's like one thing, on the right side it's another? That's also a valid approach too, right?
I think it kind of goes to the, the conversation that we've been having about the sub-area boundaries in general. How, they are almost, in a way, they're almost more very loosely administrative, but not practical in terms of how these separate neighborhoods actually exist, and what would be an actual logical boundary, especially from a land use planning standpoint. You take transportation citywide, but in terms of specific areas, what's happening on one side of 220th, should be happening on the other side of 220th, but right now that's an edge.
Right.
So it'd be kind of a missed opportunity to spend a lot of time thinking about one side of the street, but then having to wait, hopefully not a year, but I know our work calendar is pretty tight. Whenever we get to the next areas, it kind of seems like we'd be doing a disservice to, you know, approach it that way. We might have to approach it more as treat the existing boundaries as suggestions, but, you know, when we see natural connections that exist on the other side of the boundary, maybe include that as part of the discussion.
Yeah, because I think, you know, this area, 220th already is kind of a strode, right? And the strode goes to about 56. Like, it's tough to cross. It's mostly used for higher speed traffic, but it's not very good at making the traffic high speed. It's like this weird in-between between a street and a road. And it's not like, you know, I think if we were to talk about 220th east of the interstate, like there's enough right-of-way where we could look at doing something other than just like, you know, continuing what's happening on 220th east of the interstate. We can make like in Bothell downtown, they have a boulevard and they've kind of like, you know, made it a bit more of like a Main Street kind of area where they've got these little LAs on the side. And like, I think there's a potential to do something like that on 220th and kind of have that, you know, east of 56, it gets narrower, so that gets harder, but like it's also less of a strode there. So I think, you know, there's some focus on 220th as kind of like, you know, we've already got some like, you know, they designed 220th to the west back in the 1970s, and it looks like 1970s strip malls and stuff like that. But east, I think, you know, and we're looking at, you know, updating that over 20 years, but east, I think, you know, it was sort of designed, not really designed. It looks like it just kind of happened over time. And so that would be a good area, I think, for sub-area planning.
So I guess a thought to bring this back to sort of some of the conversations we're having about land use. And I think in the spirit of just looking at some of these areas holistically, as I said, we do understand that the focus is on this north part of the city, but also understanding that there are connections and implications for the areas around them and how they connect to the south parts of Mountlake Terrace. So if we look at sort of the area around 220th and knowing that that area west of the freeway is something that could be studied as higher density development, as part of the comp planning process, it's not going to be a sharp divide along 220th. We will be looking at it on both sides. I think we can focus on what sort of that might look like, or what the extent of that might look like, more on the east side or on the north side of that 220th. But if there are thoughts, I guess, on the south side too, and how that road interplays on both sides of it, I think that would be an appropriate part of the discussion tonight.
Okay.
I would say it kind of oscillates depending on what part of 220th you're looking at.
Yeah.
So focusing on the east side of the freeway, the segment between 56th and the freeway, the south side of 220th is, you know, probably very ripe for redevelopment, given that there is already, I'm pretty sure there are apartments, I don't think they're condos, on the north side of 220th, but, you know, those could potentially be redeveloped too. The parcels closer to the freeway could be redeveloped, you know, are more open to be redeveloped, but there's a lot of parcels, you know, on the south side of 220th that could easily be redeveloped at a higher intensity, you know, to kind of mirror what would be happening on the, you know, on the west side of the freeway. But as soon as you go to the, on the east side of 56, on the south side, that's a condo. And so that's going to be pretty much impossible to redevelop. I don't want to say impossible. It'll be hard. It would be harder to redevelop. It wouldn't happen as fast.
Right.
Yeah.
So east of 56, you're probably looking at the north side of 220th being more likely to redevelop before the south side. So just literally, depending on what block you're looking at, you know, it's going to really change how feasible near-term development could happen.
Yeah, and so the south side of 220th, west of 56th, and the north side of 220th, east of 56, I think are both like duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, like small little apartments and things like that. So I think, you you know, this is also, some of them might redevelop, like the apartments on the north side of 220th, west of 56th might redevelop into something larger, but we might need to look at something that allows more smaller lot development on the south side of 220th. And I think that, you know, just kind of as a general comment, I think overall, like we've sort of got this bias towards lot aggregation, but I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. And I think we also need to look at how our building regulations like inhibit the, like, why can't you build like a small apartment building with a cafe on the ground floor in a single lot in Mountlake Terrace? And, you know, it's a combination of parking minimums and, you know, there's some other people that say things like single stair. But I think that's something that maybe a sub-area plan, and I think also just kind of general in the comp plan overall, we should be looking at. And I think, you know, I don't know why you'd end it necessarily at 56th, because like if you kind of transition from this main street to like, you know, the last 2 blocks of like, you know, or like houses that are on this very busy street, and then they can't be anything else but single family houses. And then at the end, you've got the elementary school. Like it's sort of a weird, like, you know, it's like clown planning a bit. Like we made a joke, right? Like we, sorry, cloud planning sounds mean. But I don't know, it'd be very funny to me if like there was this main street and at the end, it's like, oh, by the way, these are the last 2 houses we put in the street.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, looking at that whole corridor and maybe as it transitions up into 52nd, like that's kind of how it works now. So it makes sense to me to think of this, because this is just like an undifferentiated mass of like, you know, you can kind of see where the hill is because that's where the start of like the big descent down to 212th is. But making more logical like nodes and corridors and all that other stuff that, you know, people sort of think when they make their mental maps of the city, I think would make sense.
Yes. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is that this 220th is a future sort of activity hub for this area.
Right. Yeah, I think that's currently how it is in the land use plan. Or when the alternative 2 and 3 that we're studying or looking at it, it's already kind of growing in that way. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have this, kind of the same feeling, you know, with an area that's kind of off of these 2 sub areas, you know, on 44th, but definitely the, if you want to have any activity and you want to get to it by walking or, you know, I guess biking is a little bit, you know, increases the distance a little bit, but have activities within the neighborhood and be able to walk to it. You know, there's nothing in that area that you just circled in 220. So I think that is, you know, that's important to look at that to make sure, you know, in the future that there, you know, there's a more diverse set of activities that could occur there for residents, so they can do things and not have to get into a car. It's, I mean, it's just, it's kind of the struggle with the city as a whole. It's just like,
It is.
For the most part, you got to get in a car and go anywhere.
Yeah.
To do anything.
Yeah, and it is about like a mile, like, you know, it is about a mile from the town center. I think that's what, 1.5 miles down to 236.
Okay.
Maybe it's a mile, I don't remember off the top of my head, somewhere between the 2. So it's like a logical place for another activity hub, I think.
So what sort of uses would you see there?
Like neighborhood-focused uses. I don't know, I guess, so I think the era of developing freeway-centered uses is coming to an end. I think, you know, the neighborhood can't really support, like if you were to demolish all that and make some Walmarts or something, right? It is a big interchange. We've sort of got that to the west of the interstate, but I think we're looking at growing something that is a little bit less car-focused. I would be very concerned if, like, I think that wants to be more like neighborhood businesses and things like that. I don't know how everyone else thinks.
I think that's pretty much all.
I mean, I kind of envision, you know, any, you know, for here on 44, you know, something, you know, more mixed use, you know, commercial on the ground floor, residential on the above. And I say that too, because for these businesses to be able to thrive, there's going to have to be that population density in close proximity to support those businesses. In addition to, obviously, people might travel to those businesses too.
Yeah, this is like a logical place for that to exist, I think, because it already is that way. And then also, like, you know, there's condos to the south there that sort of border on Evergreen Playfield, but then the Jack Long Park could potentially become something like, and this is out of the sub area, but this is kind of why I feel like looking at 220th as a corridor makes more sense than just looking at the sub area. Like, you know, that could become sort of like a Veterans Park of the North, where instead of just being this afterthought next to the water tower, it becomes something more active, something that like we, you know, uses around it are kind of, you know, the stuff that faces the park and use it. And then it becomes less of like a hidey hole for people to camp and more of like a, because it's, right now it's sort of a leftover park, right? Like there's not really any use for it. There's other parks nearby. Like I think activating that is going to be important. And then we also desperately need more parks elsewhere in this area too.
In this 220th area?
The Melody Hill and Cascade View sub-areas in general, especially kind of up towards where people, a lot more people already live in the Cascade View neighborhood.
The lack of parks in this area is something that CPAG did discuss when we had this conversation with them, but there was also a conversation about the number of schools and other churches and other public spaces or semi-public spaces in the area as a sort of, as a you know, a thinking point, I guess, on this topic.
That'd be helpful to identify. So we've got the high school there. We've got Evergreen, or sorry, we've got Mountlake Terrace Elementary there. I'm not that familiar with publicly. I guess maybe there's like a tiny park north of Brighton in Melody Hill. There's different apartment complexes probably have their own public areas that are private to that apartment complex.
Yeah, I switched over to the aerial because it's slightly easier to see where the big buildings are. But I believe that this is, we talked about this school, we talked about the high school. This is a school or church lot. This is also a school over here.
Is that the Mormon church down there? Yeah.
And I do think there's a couple other additional large properties. I think this one here is also.
I would just sort of add on the comment, you know, I guess that the CPAG group, you know, made that, yes, there is open space with schools and the churches, but that type of open space is different than actual public municipal space. School's a little bit different. That's fairly more open. I mean, the school field, you know, the high school fields get activity all the time, but you can't just assume just because the church has open space that they're going to be open to having just any random person come and use it.
Yeah.
And we've seen the trends lately, churches using their surplus land now for affordable housing. So we can't just assume that just because the church has a bunch of open space that it's even going to remain open space. So those are other things to consider. So if you take away the church open space and even the school open space, and you're just looking at purely what is a city park, then it's extremely lacking in these areas. So it's.
Yeah, and I also think they don't, like, they're just kind of, you know, somebody took some parks in their hand and just tossed them out and they landed wherever they happened to fall. Like, there's not really any logical structure to it. Like, you wouldn't go to this park and say, oh yes, that is like a sort of central defining feature of the neighborhood, in the way that you would Veterans Park, or the way that you would, even to a certain extent, Evergreen Playfield or Ballinger. Even Terrace Creek, to a certain extent, is more of a barrier than it is like a center. But like, you know, it kind of makes sense in the overall plan of the city. And up here is just like, my neighborhood is, I don't even know where. What I see in this map, because the way the lines are drawn, is we've got, you know, clear corridors that already exist because they've got transit on them, and they're also sort of the wider streets. Like, can that sort of start to flesh out like some areas that give a bit more identity to different parts of the neighborhood up here? Also keeping in mind that there's a lot of terrain change. And then, you know, that weird little corner to the west of I-5 too, like, just kind of a lot divided up there that I think we need to start looking at. I don't know, in my mind, if you like live in one of these areas, you're like, oh yes, I live in that neighborhood, and this is like the, you know, I don't know, this is the 7-Eleven main neighborhood, and the other one is like the Safeway neighborhood. And then, you know, I think 48th also has a little store on it or something, but then can these like start to grow and become, you know, like you've got the brain and you've got the spinal cord, and like, can that start to give some structure to the neighborhood? And that, does that help like where we need to start identifying parks and creating connections and things like that? Is this making sense? I feel like I'm ranting.
I did want to make one note. My goodness. Some things are just very funky about this. I apologize. You had brought up this, I think this note over here on the west side of the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of the two alternatives to be studied, I mean, right now we have multifamily and some single family allowed here.
Mm-hmm.
This, nearly the entirety of this node is being studied as transitional housing as part of this work. And also looking at some of the recent park access work the city of Linwood has been doing. This whole neighborhood does have, within a 10-minute walk of the South Linwood Neighborhood Park here. So,
which is a very good park.
Yeah.
Like, I bike through there all the time. It's pretty nice. I think there are some like, there is like an axis around that lake there, and that's like a giant cliff, like where that bulge of 212th is. It's like a big cliff. Yeah, I think there's probably ways of making that a bit more of a, I don't know, it's kind of also a transition to an industrial area, but it also seems like we might think about how does that become a bit more active up there? Like,
I would say, you know, it gets a little tough when, you know, we're trying to take advantages of amenities that are outside of our jurisdictional boundary.
yeah.
It is pretty, you know, it is pretty steep there. And if we were going to rely on access to the South Linwood Park there, then there's definitely a connectivity issue crossing 212th there that would need to be looked at or in something approved. And obviously, because we would be dealing with Linwood, that would be something that they'd have to be agreeable to as well. There, I mean, I know that there is a, it's about 10 years ago or less, they improved the connection crossing 212th closer to the interurban. I don't know if we, you know, if they would, if another connection would be needed or warranted, or if that we would just rely on that, you know, that connection. It just, I think part of it would be like how far does somebody want to walk to get to that?
Right, and I think looking at it, all that stuff, so there are like a couple of ways you can kind of go through there. One is Halls Lake Way that goes around the west side of that lake. The next area is the interurban trail, which is at the town center line. And then it looks like there's just private property where, like the logical place where people in that neighborhood would walk to go to the park is the end of that street. So I think like there are definitely some connectivity challenges that are like even out of our jurisdiction, which is why it'd be nice to work a bit with Linwood on these things, but here we are. So yeah, I think it's a shuffle. It's not a terrible shuffle, but yeah, I think connectivity up to there will be a thing.
I wanted to kind of circle back real quick since you were kind of talking the concept of, the 220th corridors, sort of planning itself. We kind of focused on east of I-5, tonight, but I know the circled maps from previously, also focused it on, on the west side of I-5. Are you looking for some feedback tonight on for the west side of I-5 as well?
We are here tonight to talk about both Cascade View and Melody Hill. So if there's comments on 220th as it goes through Melody Hill as well, I think that this would be the time to discuss those.
Okay. I would say, and this is where maybe it gets kind of into creative planning, that, there's a very large apartment complex over there that is probably going to be ripe to be redeveloped within the next decade or two, just because of the age of the infrastructure. Same thing, with my argument for years with, kind of, at 212th and 44th. Could the city think creatively and be like, okay, we recognize that, these very large parcels of apartment complexes are going to be redeveloped. Can we, as part of the city say, okay, we've identified this area as underserved being a park. We will allow, it's like a bonus density, we'll allow you to build, more units that maybe would go up higher, but in lieu of that, you reserve more open space that can be deeded over to the city for a park, or, something creative like that.
I think that's something we can bring up for further discussion as part of the sub-area planning process. At this point, we're just trying to identify what sort of recommendations you all have, so we can think creatively and aspirationally as part of the sub-area work. And of course, through like implementation and policy making work, that's when we can be more defined. So something we can consider for discussion.
Yeah, I would just say for, more of a general comment for over there is that, in terms of land use, we've got a lot of, there's a commercial node over there. There's a light industrial node over there. If, especially, kind of like that Azteca complex were to be redeveloped, it'd be nice to see mixed use there. Right. We still retain the commercial, but we're also adding residential, multi-story residential, for taller buildings.
I like that.
Don't, a little bit fuzzier in terms of, the feasibility for redevelopment of, the more just commercial areas where it's just the office buildings, right now, especially with the trend, seems like nationwide, is offices are having a hard time with their vacancies. People not coming back to work, working from home. Especially since that's the area that, we'd like to target as another light rail station. It'd be nice to still maintain a mix of, increase, the residential population there, but I'm sure commercial would like to be able to take advantage of the proximity to that light rail station as well. It was the original concept that we had for the old Evergreen Elementary site. We zoned that for commercial.
Of course, they have to actually build it.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to hear during this process is to hear from people in Sound Transit and community transit on what the relationship is between what we're doing and their decisions to do things like add a new bus line or build a train station. Like, I think the 220th station should happen. It makes more sense than a lot of the other infill stations, even now, but what do they need to see to make a viable 220th station in the future, other than, you know, the board tells them to do it, and then we have to convince the board they need to do it. Like, if there is something in the future where there's some kind of incentive step zoning that if the train station is built here, then this automatic zoning density increase happens, like, is that something that influences them to, influences their decision because it increases ridership or whatever?
Me personally, I'd like to see that zoning increase regardless of whether or not we're getting the station. I think having that zoning increase would increase the strength of the argument for getting that station.
Well, I think it also determined, like, you know, if there was a station there, it could support a lot more density than if it were just running on buses that didn't even have separation, right? Like, there would be a lot more convenience for people to rely more on transit, but here it's kind of further away. People are going to rely more on cars. We're starting to get that, like, when the environmental impact statement comes back, it's going to show like red all over all of our streets. And like, sorry, I may have interrupted, but like, I think that I agree we do want more density than we have there now, but I think it's a question of how much density can we support with the infrastructure that we have, and the train station there would make a massive difference.
Have you guys been looking at all at the light industrial part of this sub area? I'm just kind of curious. I'm not saying we need to get rid of the light industrial, but, you know, the type of light industrial activities, you know, kind of has varied over the years. And I also think about employment in the city and, you know, opportunities to increase businesses in our tax base. So I'm just kind of curious if you guys have thought about that.
I would say the city does have an interest in preserving that as a light industrial area. We are concurrently doing an economic development strategic plan process where we're looking at Melody Hill in more detail as far as sort of how that can be a job center, what sort of improvements we could see there to gain economic development activity in the city. So,
I mean, we do have one very large employer that's that's already down there, and you know, in some sectors, that is a magnet for other like-minded businesses or ancillary businesses that want to locate in close proximity. Again, in the 21st century with all of our technology, that's not like the same as it was, you know, 40, 50 years ago. But, you know, I just know, you know, having that large employment center down there, you know, the one large employer, that definitely could be, you know, is an argument for not only having that station, but the fact that during the original scoping process, when they were deciding on where the stations were going to be, Edmonds really wanted that station because that would have been the closest to them and easiest for their residents to have access to. And obviously it's not a direct access, but it would be a very quick connection from, you know, the Edmonds Park and Ride and even going further west into Edmonds. So they really wanted that station as well, you know, for their own interest. But I just think of the fact that there is all that. It's a lot of land, you know, for light industrial. But part of the problem that we have, you know, is how busy 220th is. And I would probably say almost everybody who works in that light industrial area is probably driving. And for us, it would, you know, as a city, having to think about ways that we can increase the business population down there, but also make it palatable to commute to that business area by means other than just car.
Show me where the light industrial area is.
So it's all the gray. That's on the west.
Oh,
So a lot of that's like the Primera campus.
It's a mixture of Primera. We have some warehousing.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the parks is the waste transfer facility next to the parks maintenance facility. When I was working in acoustics and AV, there were actually 2 national companies based there that I would use for certain like microphone manufacturing and AV processing. So that's like there are interesting things in there.
Right.
Do you think it'd be worthwhile maybe to put, I don't know if you'd put an activity node into 20th, but like on to 20th and 99? Like, I think the interurban trail there could be more activated.
Yeah, because isn't that where the moose thing is gone, the Wally World or whatever it was called?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean,
all open
yeah. And that's technically in Edmonds, and this is like,
Oh, that's Edmonds?
yeah, it's on the wrong side of the trail, but like this is kind of,
Okay.
you know, I think Edmonds is making a bit of a node there. It's like the kind of the north end of their international district. And
What about where that bingo place is? Is that Mountlake Terrace?
the bingo place across the street, yeah, that's just north of that. That's Mountlake Terrace. And I don't know if the lot north of it is. I think it is, like that vacant lot that's just to the north of that. And then every time I bike by that warehouse with the big blank wall on the south side of 220th in the interurban, I think this would be a fantastic place to open one of those breweries and just kind of have it look on the trail.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know, I think this is sort of a forgotten node that is mostly Edmonds, but it's also, we probably have a part in looking at what is happening there as well.
I see, Mandy, you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to check in with everybody on schedule and how we're doing time-wise, because I know you also have the introduction to goals and policies tonight as well. So just checking in.
Yeah. Do we want to give it another 5 minutes and then move on to the next portion?
I have a question.
Sure.
What are we going to do with that? I don't know what the right terminology is going to be, so you can fix me if you need to. That little lay-down yard for the construction area that's currently right off of 220th and before I-5, where all the construction people coming in and out that are building the light rail. Once the light rail is up and going, what's that going to be?
So I'm actually not entirely sure. But I knew just south of there's some that was rezoned to recreation. And so there's thinking that we want to make that into like a sort of pocket park just south of that. That's longer term thinking here, but we did rezone that to recreation and parks zoning. The parcel just above, I'm not sure what the future of that would be just yet.
I think that automatically should be the highest, most intense residential
Right?
or mixed use that we can put there.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, and that also, like, if they ever did build a 220th station, my understanding is they're keeping that parcel in reserve for if they do build a 220th station.
Oh,
Like, that would almost be like the city should be working very closely with the Sound Transit and the developer to, like, steer that process along.
Does Sound Transit own that land now?
Yeah.
So they
It
got
was a
it from
staging
the
area.
school district?
Yeah. They got it from somebody who bought it from the school district. And I don't remember if I think they bought it, I don't remember if they use eminent domain, but like there was a proposal for that site and then it got bought and now it's transitional, or now it's a staging area for light rail. And then there's, surplus light rail land is supposed to become affordable housing, like they sell it first, but because this might be a future station. I think last I heard, they're holding on to it.
oh.
I don't know if it's changed.
Is there any other comments, recommendations for these two sub areas? I know we focus a lot on Melody Hill. Anything in Cascade View?
Yeah, I mean, my comment is kind of like the approach of, the sort of thinking about 220th holistically, 44th, I would say is the same. It's kind of tough for me, looking at this and just focusing on 44th, just for the northern part when the potential for redevelopment exists a little bit more further south because there's already, a small commercial node and, that is already there that could potentially be, redeveloped in the future. Across the street, is some deeper, larger lots that have the potential for redevelopment. But when I think about, we were talking about connectivity, part of the problem here, again, it's the same comment that I had, for the 220th section. You can't really walk anywhere. It's not a great walk on, to take, 44th.
No.
To get to either of the main commercial nodes. And once you get to those main commercial nodes, I mean, heck, Albertson, Safeway, whatever you want to call it, if you're trying to enter that site as a pedestrian,
Yeah.
good luck. It's a little bit better at Cedar Plaza, but not by much. So it's creating connectivity in the neighborhood to get people to 44th, make them want to walk there, and then make them, make it so they don't have to walk as far to get to stuff.
So would you put an activity node there?
I would.
Yeah.
But that's again, that area is kind of outside of the sub area, so I don't know if, we want to put that there tonight or.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need, maybe the red circles are it, but I think we need activity nodes at 212th and 52nd and 44th. And I think the red circles might actually be that. One comment I have, and maybe this is as we go a little bit further down, but a street that's primarily used as vehicular transportation, or even one that's used somewhat for vehicular transportation, is kind of a miserable main street to be on. You sit at Hemlock and you hear the cars roar by. And the way the town center plan is dealing with that is they're building 57th, and that's going to be sort of the main commercial street. For some of these neighborhoods, it might be challenging to do something that elegant, but I would like to see, as we're tonight, if I understand, we're identifying the centers, right? The centers of activity.
Right, we're identifying what are the activity hubs existing, what could be future activity hubs, what are the main issues around infrastructure, transportation access.
Yeah, okay. So I think looking at something where you maybe have a street parallel or perpendicular to the main traffic street might be a worthwhile thing to investigate in the future, and just kind of what that actually looks like once we sort of dig down into this a bit further. And, I think I said before, but we need more parks up there. The other thing that I think is maybe an unappreciated opportunity is connecting Melody Hill South to Lake Ballinger. So there is a weird little sidewalk that kind of at the very end of 67th or whatever, you can veer off and it'll connect you to Lake Ballinger. Are there possible ways of, because it's physically very close to Lake Ballinger, but there's just, a cliff and apartments and stuff in the way. Is there a way that we can let more of Melody Hill access this facility that is actually quite close?
Yeah, we can look into it. Yeah.
When you're asking sort of activity nodes, I would definitely say, you've got Cedar Plaza, that area is circled up at 212th and 44th. We were fortunate enough to control 3 of the 4 sides of that intersection. That's definitely an activity node, being that that's also the closest location to the Linwood Light Rail Station. I would say, the biggest traffic generator in this neighborhood, though, is the high school. So while nothing is going to change with the high school, I would still, call it an activity node because it is going to, it is a traffic generator.
I did have one additional question just to make sure that we're sort of identifying some of these corridors correctly. We've spoken a lot about 220th, and it can be sort of, I guess, an independent hub for both Melody Hill residents and another hub on this side of the freeway for both Cascade View residents or those from other parts south of the city to come up here. There's an active main street with some commercial uses. We've talked about the commercial down here at Cedar Plaza and how that could be a draw for some of these residents in Cascade View. So ensuring connections south through this area, whether it's along 44th or along a secondary, more peaceful street to walk or bike down. As part of the alternatives we're studying, we're looking at additional commercial nodes somewhere sort of in between QFC and Safeway, sort of in these areas reflecting some of the existing commercial allowed there. So there's I guess another node here that we'll be looking at as part of the land use changes. But the 212 and sort of this horizontal corridor up here, where Mountlake Terrace really only does control one half of that corridor, as the north half is the city of Linwood. It's all currently multifamily. We talked a little bit about whether or not additional bus access would allow for where more density might encourage bus and transit along that street. But I guess I wanted to ask where some of these other horizontal connections, or if we are sort of strong in our thinking about these more vertical north to south connections and hubs. Oops.
I'm all for the horizontal connections. I just know that's harder to do. It's a combination of the fact it's already developed or topography. Mm-hmm. For that little area of 212 that we were talking about here, definitely I think a lot of the multifamily there, it's going to be hitting the end of its life cycle. Again, I've said that before. So I think that whatever zoning's in place to prepare for that, the future should allow for denser, higher redevelopment, again, because of the proximity to both the interurban trail and the light rail station. But you're really hard pressed to find a smooth east-west connector here. I mean, I've lived here my whole life. It's been the bane of my existence. It's missed opportunities over the decades of potentially increasing that connectivity point. So can it literally be something as small scale as the city buying a parcel or two just to connect to discontinuous streets? I don't know, because then you might have what was once a very quiet residential street all of a sudden becomes busier, or if the connection is only pedestrian and bike, maybe not as bad. But having lived on a street that once upon a time had that kind of connection, it can be a magnet for other problems, and the connections can end up going away. So it's a heavier lift, but I don't want to say just because we haven't mentioned it that it isn't something that shouldn't be looked at. It's just where to start. That's the hard question. I mean, I've been squawking for years to have a 228th connection connecting east and west.
I think
it's a non-starter with some people. So
I think you brought up a good point about the up-down, the sort of vertical connection. As somebody who bikes up 220th and kind of in that area, like, it is a bit of an unpleasant street at the moment, and part of it might be that it's in Linwood, but part of it is also there's a big hill. And so when I think about what the city is, it's less of like corridors and more like top of the hill, bottom of the hill. And the 7-Eleven is like at the bottom of the hill, and the Safeway is at the top of the hill. And in my mind, those are almost two different neighborhoods. I think, if we did want to make that a corridor, that might help reduce that. I think, we could look at putting activity nodes. There are already existing commercial places at 212th and 52nd and 48th in addition to 44th, so we could put little circles there if we wanted to. I think the other big problem with this, and maybe you alluded to it as well, is just like the connection. The rest of the city kind of has more or less kind of a grid, like it's not all connected. There are obvious disconnections in places, but this is just a big mass of like parking lots that then access streets. And so, how do you turn it less from like a bunch of apartment buildings on their own little blocks to a more cohesive neighborhood that, when you're walking and you're biking around, it kind of makes sense to you, oh, this is a neighborhood. I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I think that is a challenge for 212.
Right. Well, I guess I feel like we've gotten some really great comments tonight.
In this, I would say, again, because you'd mentioned, parallel access, and those are conversations that we've had over the years as well, whether, an alternative north-south connection is 58th or on the east side of the city, 48th. Because 44th is a freight corridor, it makes it really hard to do anything that reduces lane capacity there, especially when you're thinking about, how semis are going to have to turn on and off. I understand, the concept of, the right-of-way should be for all users, but it gets really difficult because of the the traffic demands of 44th to try and squeeze in, really wide sidewalks, street trees, bike lanes, and still maintain some sort of freight corridor. Looking to put, at least some of that, make some improvements on 48th as well. Knowing that we can't have everything that we want on 48th or 44th, so, kind of split the difference and, put that, maybe put that great bike lane on 48th, and then make it and take that space that you would have used for the bike lane on 44th and make it so pedestrian activity feels a little bit safer and has a little bit more of a buffer from
The busy street.
the busy street that is going to stay busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need different design strategies for each of these things for sure. Like, we have so many different kinds of demands on all our streets that I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And I understand Chrissy's made the comment in the past that any time that there's any kind of federal funding, they require a bike lane to be put in there. And, if that's a constraint, I guess we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But I just, I look at the sort of road diet, so to speak, that's already happened on, when 44th becomes Cedar Way. And I see a mile of turn lane when maybe that could have been, thought out a little bit better. I just know that's not going to work for, that segment of 44th between Cedar Plaza and Albertson. So, it might have to be a dual strategy of improving 44th and 48th simultaneously. But regardless of having activity, having some sort of node on 44th, so it's within walking distance for people.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're you're taking the Greenway and then you're intersecting with 44th, and that's like the pedestrian hub.
So I think we've got a lot of good feedback from you all. My recommendation would be to take these comments, what we've heard from Comp Plan Advisory Group and Planning Commission, and allow the consultants to further their analysis, and then we can bring back some ideas to you at a later meeting.
And I do have one final question. Do we have any places that are more than half a mile from the activity node in this place? Because I think that's like important.
We can bring back, as we, analyze the information that we've received here, and as we move forward with some recommendations and some new maps, we can show some of those half-mile radii and walk sheds.
Okay, yeah, I think that'd be good to have, identify at least that we're sort of covering the area in some kind of central places so that everyone can walk to one.
I would say as part of, if you're able to and you have the bandwidth to do this, as part of that analysis, not just do the radii, but, the actual walking distance, since a lot of distance is eaten up because of sort of our spaghetti network of streets and it's not a straight shot.
Yeah.
I'd also like to see, while a half mile is used kind of as, sort of the standard, what people are willing to walk, a lot of people can't walk that far. Even a quarter mile might be difficult for some. So I'd be kind of interested to see, the sort of the half mile distance, but maybe even a quarter mile. Eighth of a mile might be pushing it a little too much, but it's just, because this community has always been so auto dependent, it is so hard for people who've lived here a long time to even start thinking about a mode of transportation other than getting into their car. And so while we as planners or people in sort of related professions, we're like, oh yeah, half mile, no big deal. For the average person, that may be like out of the question or just like, or beyond their comprehension at this point. So we might think of it, oh, half mile radii, we're capturing this many people, but how many of those people are we really capturing who are at the end of that half mile radius?
Yeah, so we can absolutely do that analysis now that we have some of these center points to do that from. And our what we might recommend doing is instead of doing it by mile or half mile, but talking about like 5-minute walk or a 10-minute walk, because that's something that is easier for people to kind of wrap their heads around what that means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also remember that not everybody walks at the same speed.
It is an average.
All right.
So real quick, I know before we move on, I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting our online commissioner tonight. Commissioner Landis, you got any additional feedback, or have we kind of covered everything that was maybe you were thinking of as well?
No, nothing from me. I've been really impressed with the conversation, so thanks for everybody's participation.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All right, so our next steps to wrap us up tonight is to kick off our review or your review of the proposed draft land use and housing policies. So as previously presented, the review process for the elements for the comp plan are going to follow this 3-step process. Last time we all got together, we introduced the goals for the land use and housing element, and tonight we are going to distribute the full goal and policy matrix for both elements. And you will have a document for the next week or so to review and write your comments down, and we will compile those comments, and at a third meeting, May 11th, we'll discuss those.
So Shannon's handing out the files. You'll also receive an electronic copy via email before the close of this meeting.
So as those get passed out, What I have on the slide here is a screenshot of kind of what you're looking at here. So as we've presented at some previous meetings, there's been a lot of analysis and thought that's gone through sort of how do the existing policies line up, how to consolidate some of the older plan elements. We've consolidated a couple elements into one land use element at this time. Some notes about the type of language recommended, sort of where the policies line up with regional requirements, and then sort of how all that turned into the proposed goal and policy language. We'll also note that there's a couple columns that relate back to the feedback we received from CPAG. So that green square indicates where we received green dots of support from the CPAG group. These are policies that really resonated and were supported by CPAG. And then the column with the red comments are the questions and other topics that were brought up from the group on those policy items. Some of them are very well related, and some of them we had some questions and comments about sort of how all these topics fit together. You'll also find a second notes column that has a running dialogue of where additional discussion is thought to be needed on these policies. These are a draft. And will continue to be discussed and worked on throughout the spring after we receive your comments on the policy work. And then that last column that is blank, which is where we would like you to write your thoughts and comments on sort of the approach that's been taken, but additionally would love track changes as well. In Word, it's also acceptable way to respond. So as I spoke to before, we are distributing this matrix today, the 26th, both paper and electronic copies. Your comments and revisions are due May 4th by 4 p.m. You can email them to Shannon. And we have, if you're going to do it in Word, we would love to please use track changes so we know what is new. And handwritten comments are also acceptable, can be scanned in and sent via email. And we will be having a full discussion on the comments received at the next Planning Commission meeting on March 11th.
And I'll just add, because of the Open Public Meeting Act, we ask that you did not discuss outside of a formal meeting to avoid any possibility of a quorum outside of a formal meeting. So.
Do we have any questions before we wrap up today?
I think we're good for now.
Amazing. So this is sort of our running list of all of our upcoming next steps. Today, we are presenting you with the goals and policies as well as our sub-area exercise. On March 11th, we'll be reviewing those comments and also introducing the environment and the recreation, parks, and open space elements. So we'll be running through those goals. And the March 25th meeting, you'll receive those draft policies in a similar matrix format that you're seeing today for land use and housing. And then introducing economic vitality. So we have this sort of rolling process through the next couple of months to evaluate and receive your comments on all the elements.
As far as timeline, that March 4th, comments received will be uploaded as meeting materials for the public record on March 11th. So. And that's it for us. Any final questions?
Anyone got any?
Sorry, have we been sent the Word document already, or will that be sent around?
I believe Shannon will be sending that email prior to adjournment.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess with that, we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. Item number 6, Planning Commission Work Plan 2024 and 2023 accomplishments.
Okay, so I'm stepping in for Christy today to present that. Let's see, save. Okay. So today we're presenting the 2024 draft work plan for Planning Commission, as well as the 2023 Planning Commission accomplishments document that will be shared with City Council on March 14th. We also have a draft transmittal letter for review and signature by Chair Batista. So since the City Council meeting is March 14th, we'd like to ask that gets that we finalize any comments before the next meeting, because those meeting materials for council do need to be in the Wednesday before the meeting. So just timing wise, we're a little condensed there. Let's see. Okay. So staff has put together a 2023 Planning Commission annual report for review by City Council. I will scroll through it and feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So we have the cover page, we have all the Planning Commission members, 2023 accomplishments, so we're highlighting some of the things that happened. So a light rail, Vision 2044 kicked off. We had a open house for the Comp Plan 101 with council. It was a joint meeting with council and CPAG as well. Improvements to Veterans Memorial Park. I believe that's what that photo's for.
May I jump in?
Yes.
That was meant to represent one of your accomplishments with changes to the code that you have done, although you've done many.
Yes.
We noted that the tree code was one of the more arduous ones that was conducted throughout 2023.
Yes, thank you, Shannon. So then the last page just summarizes some of the buckets of work by category. So code amendments, we had the engineering development manual review, zoning text amendment for private recreational facilities, which was recently passed through council. Amendments to chapter 1505 and 1510, so building and construction code, which is also going to council. And then the tree code update, which passed through council, will be effective come March 27th. Comprehensive plan, review and discussion of draft comprehensive plan, the crucial role that you're all playing as part of this process. We have the Vision 2044 survey and open house, and then Planning Commission liaison appointments to the CPAG. So we have Commissioner Betcher and Commissioner Morgan as an alternate supporting that work. And then other activities, so update on the Sound Transit Linwood Link extension, zoning designation and annexation of 4713 to 40th Street Southwest. We have here the chair's attendance at the 2023 APA conference. So before I move on to the 2024 draft work program, any questions on this document?
Good year, everyone.
No, looks good.
Okay. So moving on to the 2024 draft work program. So we have here proposed work program items by priority. So a bulk of it is high priority. Of course, we have the preparation of the major comprehensive plan update with the start date of November. That's not correct. And then high priority, we have the comp plan EIS. So concurrent with the major update, we're also doing the EIS to support that. Comprehensive plan docketing process. We have the transportation management plan, which is also part of this comprehensive plan update work. So we have Fair and Piers leading that work. And then we have the middle housing study. So we received a grant from Commerce to fund code update work to ensure that we're complying with HB 1110. So we'll be aiming for a draft ordinance by 2020, summer of 2024. We're required to have a final ordinance to the state by June of 2025. So that's something to look out for. Regarding code updates, again, Title 15, and we're going to review and amend our critical areas ordinance. So that's something that we'll be doing, and that'll be led by our associate planner, Sarah Pizzo. And then development review update is something we do annually. So we'll be reviewing current development activities and projects on a 6-month basis. Any questions or comments there?
Seems like a full plate.
I know, it was like everything's high.
Yeah.
There's a lot of important work this coming year. And I'll just add here, there may be opportunity to start the discussion on the ADU code regulations as well. Those are required to be updated by June of 2025, but with the time we do or do not have, it's a busy year, we might start that discussion as well. And then we have the transmittal letter that Chair Batista will sign. I won't read it word for word, but if you want to give it a quick read and just make sure it's representative of your ideas.
Is everybody fine with that letter?
Okay.
Very basic.
Yeah.
There's a lot contained within those few sentences, though.
Yeah, that my concern is, obviously, I'm sure council recognizes that, but, you know, what might be one line of one item represent, like, without exaggeration, 5 meetings and over months and months and months and many hours of discussion. So I'm sure they realize that.
It's like one step below, we're going to do planning. Update the comp plan, like, is defined enough where I think it's recognizable, but there's just a lot that goes into that.
Absolutely. And then we do encourage you all to attend that March 14th meeting. And I think that's all I have.
All right, so if there's nothing else for the work plan update, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 7, director's report. Do you have anything to report since you're filling in for the director?
We do not have a report today.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to item number 8, miscellaneous business by call of planning commissioners. Anybody have any miscellaneous business?
I actually have a question for the director. I was biking down the Interurban Trail on Sunday, and at 224th, I saw that there's this building that's at the end of it that is like right on Halls Creek that looks like it's about to become something, but it's been like abandoned for many years, and it was formerly a dental clinic. I think this is more of a comment, but like it looked like a very complicated environmental site, and I imagine it was a challenge to like figure out how to make a building of that age like habitable again and not abandoned. So I just wanted to say, good job.
I would forward that on. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Landis.
Just a quick sort of update on personal stuff. Our second son was born on February 10th. His name is Eddie.
Hi, Eddie.
And as a result of that, I'll probably be remote for the next 2-3 meetings as we kind of get our life under control with 2 little guys at home. So I just want to say thanks in advance for your understanding in my remote participation, and I look forward to seeing you all whenever I'm able to get in there.
All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, not hearing or seeing anything, so we'll go ahead and declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Recording stopped.